You know what nobody told you about Wednesday night in Toronto? Nobody told you that a tennis match could feel like a homecoming for a country 9,800 miles away. Nobody warned the WTA that a 21-year-old from the Philippines was about to walk into a 12,000-seat stadium she'd never set foot in before, in a city she'd never played in, 48 hours after the biggest week of her life, and turned the whole place into something that looked less like a Canadian hard court and more like a block party in Manila. And if you'd been sitting up in the upper bowl of CBC Stadium that night, the first thing that would have hit you wasn't the tennis. It wasn't the serve speeds or the baseline rallies. It was the flags. Rows and rows of them. 3 stripes, a gold star, held up above heads that, by every logical scheduling metric, were not supposed to be there. Not in those numbers. Not in that city. Not on that date. The rumors had been swirling all week long that Alex Eala's Toronto debut was gonna pull a crowd the National Bank Open simply had not planned for. That a stadium built for 12,000 plus would go full Filipino from the concourse to the rafters. That the WTA was about to walk into something its scheduling grid had zero contingency for. And then the doors opened, and the rumors stopped being rumors. They became a 12,000-person reality. Now, to really get what went down on Wednesday, you gotta compress 3 days into one single frame, because this timeline is almost absurd. August 3rd, Eala steps onto the court in Washington, D.C. for the $1 City D.C. Open Final, and she takes down world number 3 Jessica Pegula, 4-6, 6-4, 6-love. A bagel in the final set, over a top 3 player, for her first career WTA singles title. And in the middle of all that emotion, she grabs the mic and says, "Here, in the middle of all this love, my first chance at the title, knowing it won't be my last." August 4th, the new WTA rankings drop, and Alex Eala of the Philippines is sitting at world number 20, career high, and the first time any Filipino player, man or woman, has ever cracked the top 20 in the history of professional tennis. August 5th, no rest day, no proper training block, not even a proper homecoming ceremony. She gets on a plane, flies north, and walks into her Toronto debut. Champion on Monday, top 20 on Tuesday, debut on Wednesday, and Wednesday did not care that she was tired. The National Bank Open is a WTA 1000 event. That's the tier right below the Grand Slams, where the depth of the draw will absolutely punish you if your legs are even 2 matches short. And her opponent, Alicia Parks, had already beaten her earlier that year at the Australian Open. Parks is a big serving American with the kind of forehand that ends points before you've even finished setting your feet. On paper, the tension was simple. Could a champion who hadn't even slept off her championship find another gear against someone specifically built to punish tired legs? But underneath that, there was a second tension, and honestly, it mattered more. She was carrying 2 jobs onto that court. She had to play tennis at the level she'd just earned against an opponent who'd already solved her once. And she had to be, for the several thousand people in that stadium waving her country's flag, the first Filipino tennis champion they'd ever gotten to cheer for in person, in a stadium this size, on a broadcast this big. Those are not the same job. Most players never learn to do the first one. Almost no player is ever asked to do both simultaneously, in their first appearance in a foreign country, 48 hours after the biggest week of their life. And here's the thing the WTA's been wrestling with for 2 seasons now. The tour has been searching for its next generational personality. Someone who moves audiences the way Serena Williams once did, the way Naomi Osaka briefly did. And it hadn't been obvious where that person was gonna come from. What Wednesday showed is that the answer might already be here, and the tour's own broadcast planning is now scrambling to catch up. The evidence starts with the match itself. Eala came out of the gate at a level that made the first set almost unfair. She won 5 straight games from 1-all, closed the opener 6-1, and did not face a single break point on her serve in that set. The WTA's own official recap described the atmosphere inside CBC Stadium as, and I'm quoting here, an electric, packed stadium. Their words. Not a fan account. Not a Filipino outlet. The tour's own house language. And that phrasing matters. A WTA 1000 does not casually throw around the word electric for a Wednesday second-round match involving a debutant. It uses that word when the room has fundamentally changed shape. Then the second set hit, and reality came knocking. Parks, who does not hand out free points when she's locked in, saved 4 break points to hold for 3-2, then broke Eala in the 10th game to take the set 6-4. And that was the first genuine moment of doubt in the entire week. The first sign that 7 consecutive wins across 2 cities and 2 tournaments were starting to press down on a 21-year-old body. The 3rd set is where the story got decided. They traded early breaks. Then at 2-all, Eala broke again and never looked back. 6-2 in the decider. 1 hour and 51 minutes on the clock. 14 break points earned across the match, 5 converted. Her 6th consecutive win. Her 17th career match win at WTA 1000 level. Her second win over Alicia Parks, the first one in Toronto, avenging that Australian Open loss she'd quietly filed away in the back of her mind. But the number that actually mattered wasn't on any stat sheet. The number that mattered was the one the tournament almost certainly did not model for when they assigned her a court and a time slot. Sobeys Stadium seats over 12,000. The WTA's own recap called it packed. And according to reporting from Rappler, the Philippine Daily Inquirer, and ABS-CBN Sports, the overwhelming majority of that noise was Filipino. Reddit's tennis community, in the match thread posted immediately after, singled out the Filipino turnout as, quote, something else. Multiple non-Filipino tennis fans were commenting on the density and the discipline of that crowd. This was not a normal WTA 1000 second-round audience. This was a diaspora that had spent the last 6 months learning exactly which airport to fly into and exactly which day to book off work. And that's worth sitting with for a second. Toronto has a tennis history. Toronto produced Bianca Andreescu, a US Open champion. Toronto has hosted Leylah Fernandez, a US Open finalist and a hometown favorite. Toronto knows what a packed stadium for a home player looks like. What Toronto did not know until Wednesday night is what a packed stadium looks like for a player from a country 9,800 miles away, playing her debut, ranked 20th in the world, seeded 25th in the draw. The tournament is now redrawing its own assumptions in real time. And the clearest evidence came the very next morning, when the National Bank Open confirmed that Eala had received the final main draw wild card in the doubles competition, paired with Venus Williams. Venus, 46 years old, back on tour for the first time since 2022, one of the two most recognizable names in the entire history of women's tennis. And that pairing got slotted into a night session. When a tournament pairs a debutante with an all-time legend in a primetime doubles match, the tournament is telling you exactly who it thinks fills the building. That's not a coincidence. That's programming. And the tennis press outside the Philippines is now confirming what the crowd already knew. Defector, a subscription-driven American sports publication with zero diaspora incentive, published a feature on August 5th describing Eala as, quote, catching the WTA's best off guard, citing her service numbers through the Washington run, her tactical patience, and what the piece called mass devotion from her audience. That is a serious American tennis outlet using the phrase mass devotion about a 21-year-old who won her first title 2 days earlier. The New York Times, through The Athletic, ran its own long feature on the DC final and the historic significance of a Filipino winning a WTA title for the first time. The Guardian led its Sunday sports coverage with the story. These are not fan sites. These are the general sports desks of major English-language outlets independently deciding that this run is a global story, not a regional one. And here's where the two stories, the tennis one and the crowd one, finally crash into each other. After match point on Wednesday, still breathing hard, Eala did what champions do on foreign courts. She thanked the city. She thanked the tournament. She said the polite thing about culture and atmosphere. And then, off script, she said this. There are so many Filipinos in the crowd tonight. So many flags. Thank you. And then in her official post-match remarks, reported by the WTA, she delivered the sentence this entire night had been building toward. The sentence a country 9,000 miles from Toronto had been waiting to hear its representative say in a place she'd never been. She said, quote, I felt very at home in Canada. In her debut, in a WTA 1000 stadium, she used the word home. That's not an athletic quote. That's a cultural document. And when Chris Evert, 18-time major champion, one of the most respected analytical voices in tennis, someone who does not casually co-sign rising players, took to her verified Instagram earlier in the DC week to post about Eala's semi-final win over Elena Rybakina, her caption was 4 words. Good job, Alexa. Champion. Not future champion. Not one to watch. Champion. Before Eala had lifted a trophy, before the ranking hit 20, before Toronto happened, Evert had already made her decision, and she wanted the tennis internet to know it. Evert has been watching this sport at the highest analytical level for 5 decades. Her Instagram is not a rumor mill. It's a signal she uses sparingly, and she used it here. That's the establishment placing a bet. Her coach, John Bosch of the Rafa Nadal Academy, was profiled by ESPN in early August specifically on how he and Eala solved the middle stretch of her DC comeback against Pegula. The point in the second set where a player her age is supposed to blink and doesn't. ESPN is not a Philippine outlet chasing a national story. It's the largest sports broadcaster in the United States making the editorial decision that a Filipino player's tactical adjustment is worth a feature. Two independent Tier 1 voices, Evert and ESPN, arriving at the same conclusion in the same week before this Toronto run even started. That's not narrative momentum. That's a consensus forming. And the stakes now stretch way beyond a single tournament. The Philippines has a sports economy that runs almost entirely on basketball and boxing, with a national attention span for tennis that used to switch on twice a year for the majors and switch off between them. That arrangement is dead. Eala's 2026 prize money, per ABS-CBN's reporting, is now over $1.5 million, roughly 93 million Philippine pesos in a single season, before the North American hard-court swing has even hit its midpoint. Live viewership on Philippine broadcast has climbed with every round. Broadcast partners are reorganizing their tennis calendars. And on the tour side, WTA 1000 events are increasingly designed around crowd energy as a broadcast asset. A player who brings her own audience city to city, country to country, is no longer a curiosity. She's a scheduling variable. Toronto's decision to build a night session around Eala and Venus Williams is, in the language of tournament programming, an admission of what she is now worth to the building. The next stops, Cincinnati in mid-August, then the US Open, are already recalculating around that same variable. Anyone booking a session ticket to any of those events in the next month is booking against the possibility that the stadium will, at some point that night, feel like Manila. None of which erases the fact that on Wednesday, she almost lost the second set for reasons that had nothing to do with tennis. 6 matches won in 7 days, a flight, a different city, a different court, a different climate, a body that had spent the previous week producing the highest tennis of her career against Pegula, Rybakina, and the field. And then Parks, who does not miss opportunities, saving break points and forcing a third. Eala's own post-match assessment, per the WTA's official recap, was measured. She said, "She played really well in the second, and there were definitely things I could have done a little better. I tried to improve on that in the third. I tried to come out hot and just take all the opportunities that I could, because she doesn't really give you much." That's a 21-year-old, 48 hours after her first title, in her first Toronto match, describing a mid-match tactical reset without excuses and without inflation. The fatigue was real. The response to it was more real. So consider where she's standing right now. Consider who she's standing next to. She's in the tournament Chris Evert once dominated, receiving a public endorsement from Chris Evert herself. She's in a doubles draw with Venus Williams, by the tournament's design, in prime time. She's being written about by ESPN, by the New York Times through The Athletic, by The Guardian, by Defector. None of whom cover players out of obligation. All of whom cover players who move the needle. Her third-round opponent, Katie McNally, just eliminated the reigning Wimbledon champion. That's the room she's in now. That's the level of the draw. And 48 hours ago she was lifting a trophy in Washington. And tonight she's standing in a WTA 1000 stadium in a country she'd never played in, telling 12,000 strangers she felt at home, and being believed, because half of them brought her flag. The WTA called it electric. The tournament rearranged its night session around her. The press outside her country is writing her into the sport's current chapter, not the next one. Alexandra Eala plays Katie McNally. And later that same week, Venus Williams and Alexandra Eala will walk out together for a doubles match in Toronto's night session. That's the calendar. That's the room. That's where she is right now. And if you wanna see what she becomes next, the streams and broadcast schedules are already up. And if you're riding with this channel, we'll be here for every single round of it. Because whatever this is, folks, it is not slowing down.